We're all gonna die. Yeah, yeah. There's no heaven, no matter how hard you try.
Yeah, miss me with that bullshit that you spitting from that pulpit. All that hocus pocus, abracadabra, all these bad beliefs and bad ideas, I shatter them. What happened, bruh? Getting awfully quiet. Oz was here to start that riot.
We're all gonna die.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no heaven, no matter how hard you try.
First of all, I'm going to say thanks to everybody for the kind words they sent me after the death of my father. He passed away in June, and everybody was so kind to send their condolences. And they know our relationship has been rather rocky. It's really been a weird time the last several months, not just because of the death of a parent, but because I've kind of been the black sheep in my family since 2007. When I began to question my faith out loud. And of course, I'm an atheist in an evangelical family with theologian parents living in Jesustown, Oklahoma. Tulsa, Oklahoma is where I was born and where I've lived my 53 years. When I say Jesustown, of course, Tulsa, Oklahoma, I have a long history here. I still live here. It's a nice town. It's a friendly place. It has good people. The cost of living is good. It's got a good layout, a good vibe, but it also has a history. And I have a larger point that I want to get into, but I'm going to start with a specific story, a story that I first heard about for the first time 15 years ago, about the Tulsa Race Massacre. I was pushing 40 years old before I was introduced to this history of my very own hometown for the first time. And the short version of the story goes like this. It was 1921 in the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And Tulsa, of all places, was known for an affluent and prosperous African American community. The Greenwood District, it was really something else. Businesses thrived, industry thrived, the people thrived. So much so that this tiny little part of the world was sometimes called the Black Wall Street. The Greenwood District was a unique place of opportunity and community for Black people, especially considering the racial attitudes that were rampant 100 years ago. It was really something really remarkable. This is the current address of what was then the Drexel Building. It's a Renberg's clothing store today, but 100 years ago, it looked like this. And in this building, there was a young Black man. His name was Dick Rowland. And he was riding the same elevator as a 17-year-old woman named Sarah Page. Now, nobody knows what happened in that elevator for sure. It's believed that Dick Rowland accidentally may have brushed up against her, or he said he may have accidentally touched her with his hand, whatever. She freaked out. And she ran from the elevator yelling that she had been assaulted or attacked. And at that moment, a fuse was lit. Dick Rowland was arrested. They took him to jail as police investigated this quote unquote crime. And the next day, the Tulsa Tribune newspaper published a sensationalized, inflammatory, and racist hit piece about the boy. And the headline, "Nab Negro for attacking girl in an elevator." The article falsely declared that Dick Rowland had been attempting to assault Sarah Page. That was just patently untrue. Within hours of publication of this article, mobs gathered outside the Tulsa courthouse where the boy was being held before trial on state charges. By the way, those charges were soon totally dismissed. But a mob had gathered outside the courthouse. many in the mobs carrying firearms. There was a white lynch mob there, essentially ready to take the boy and carry vigilante justice out. And so the black community rallied. They gathered together to try to counter the white mob. The sheriff and the deputies inside the courthouse ended up barricading the entire top floor of the building to protect this kid. Other white men were deputized and given firearms. Many of those men abused that power against the black community. Once they were armed and deputized, they actually joined the white mob. Outside the windows of the courthouse, you could hear the sounds of gunshots as things escalated. The Oklahoma National Guard was activated. Martial law was declared. Now, if you're not familiar with martial law, that's when the military is called up during an emergency to essentially become the police power over civilians. Martial law. And if martial law is declared, you are in a very, very bad place indeed. So the African Americans retreated back to the Greenwood district, and the white mob followed them there. And in the early morning of June 1st, 1921, the people at home in the Greenwood district looked out their windows and they saw this. They saw torches. They heard pistols and shotguns. They saw the broken glass, the broken down doors. They screamed and grabbed their kids and all their loved ones as the mob essentially set fire to the community that they had built from scratch. The thriving Black Wall Street was on fire. Their homes, their livelihoods, sheer terror and hate and murder in this part of the world. When the smoke cleared, 35 blocks were totally leveled, burned and crushed and looted, utterly destroyed. More than 800 people treated for injuries. The white majority media at the time reported 35 deaths in the massacre. That number was hugely low. They say historians have gone back and reverse engineered. They say as many as 300 people, 300 instead of 35 may have been killed. It's believed that racists were jealous of Greenwood's prosperity. They were looking for an excuse, any excuse to declare war on this Black Wall Street, which allowed colored people, the coloreds, quote unquote, to live in comfort and even luxury just a few blocks away from the white man. They wanted to tear down what the black community had built, and they lusted after the land of the Greenwood district. And this bogus assault story essentially gave them an excuse to declare war, to outnumber and destroy their black neighbors as a city burned. Nobody was ever prosecuted or punished by the government for the burning and the harming and the shooting and the killing. Nobody. And the black community was initially blamed for the whole thing. In fairness, many white Tulsans were grieved and horrified by what happened. They reached out in compassion to assist after the massacre took place. The American Red Cross activated with huge amounts of relief and help, and Greenwood ultimately survived. In fact, our mayor, G.T. Bynum, has launched an investigation into this literally buried history of the Tulsa Race Massacre, searching for articles and histories of the day and even the unmarked mass graves. This has made international news. It's been interesting to watch. You may have seen the HBO miniseries Watchmen and that first chilling scene, which brought the Tulsa Race Massacre to life on screen. For many people, 2019 on HBO was the first time they'd ever heard of it. Now, I have a point that I'm trying to make with this. I was at midlife before I'd ever heard about this story, this buried story from my own hometown, this true story of racism and hate and burning and murder in Tulsa, the Tulsa Race Massacre. And I could not escape the reality that all of this had started with a lie. It all began with a lie. I'm not going to get too political here. This is a legitimate example that spans the political spectrum. It's March of 2016. Some major players in the United States Democratic Party had their emails hacked. So WikiLeaks publishes many of those private emails to the public. And it was claimed falsely that they had coded messages in them. And those codes in the emails involved the conspiracy about major Democratic players, including Hillary Clinton, being part of an underground organization. Conspiracy pages, alt right websites, Twitter bots spread this scandalous story. And the story said that high ranking Democrats were running human trafficking and pedophile rings in the United States. And they were using specific restaurants as cover ops. The NYPD was apparently involved, and there was a story that the cops had raided Hillary Clinton's property, and the FBI was said to have confirmed this story. Then came this October story, 2016, posted on Reddit, which named a specific restaurant, a specific place that was supposedly covering for these abusers, a place called Comet Ping Pong. Now the abstract is becoming real. This was picked up and quote unquote reported on outlets ranging from InfoWars to Conservative Daily Post to 4chan. Reddit ended up banning the account outright, but the fuse was already lit, right? The lie had already been thrown out there. The pizza joint got hundreds of threats. It was accosted by zealots protesting from within and without. They were brandishing Bibles and waving signs and doing their variation on Save the Children, right? This is James Alefantis. He was the owner. He told the New York Times he was under constant attack. He was trying to protect his employees and his customers and his business amid all this. The story got bigger and bigger. Social media pages blasted the man in his restaurant. People made fake websites using his company name to try to warn the public and harass him. There were death threats against the owner of this pizza joint. How dare you traffic in human flesh, the bodies of our children, as sex slaves? So then, December 4th, 2016, this guy, Edgar Welch of Salisbury, North Carolina, he decided it was all too much. And he decided he was going to take matters into his own hands. And he walked into Comet Ping Pong Pizza carrying an AR-15. And he fired 3 shots. Fortunately, the bullets only struck objects. Nobody was hit. But you can imagine the terror, right? Sitting down, having pizza. Somebody walks in with an AR-15 and just starts firing. Edgar Welch went from place to place to place as the employees and the customers cowered in terror. He was going to expose this whole operation. He's going to liberate the children, right? Room to room, place to place. He shot open a lock to open a door. He found just kitchen supplies inside when he expected to find child trafficking evidence. He wanted to check the basement because supposedly, according to the reports, there was a tunnel in the basement that was used for trafficking children. Comet Ping Pong has no basement. So his whole thing was to liberate the kids. He was going to play the hero, right? He was charged with several felony counts. He expressed regret at how he'd handled everything, but he still believed the lie. He still believed the conspiracy theory itself. And to this day, in 2021, so do a great many other people. Still, here's one of the conspiracy theories linking the sign and the symbols for Comet Pizza to the satanic symbols of Baphomet, and of course, by association, to Satan himself. People actually believe this. As recently as June 2020, this conspiracy story became known as Pizzagate. This is a play on Watergate back from the 1960s and 70s. But Pizzagate, the story was reaching tens of millions of views on Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and more. This photo is not fake. This is a husband and wife couple that were protesting outside the White House just a couple of years ago. This is March 2017, protesting Pizzagate because it's not fake news. Investigate Pizzagate. Paranoia, disinformation, death threats, an AR-15 fired inside an innocent man's business with customers right there in the firing zone. I've been thinking about the power of the lie and some of the major events of my lifetime, the major recent events, some of the major events of history, millions of people rejecting vaccines during a global pandemic that's killed millions of people. Why? because they believe the lies about dead babies and microchips and the medicine and tools for surveillance, population control. The vaccine is being used by the government or the Illuminati, or they believe the lie that public safety measures in a community are somehow an assault on their personal liberties and freedoms. The 2020 US presidential election results show Joe Biden as the winner by 74 electoral votes, 8 million popular votes, and yet the unfounded lies of fraud and conspiracy fueled an alternate reality where up was down, where losing was winning. And an entire subculture in this country declared a kind of Christian jihad against its own democracy. An unthinkable act of domestic terrorism on the United States by its own people, January 6th, and millions of American evangelicals crying Viva Revolution as they set fire to their own country to overwrite legitimate history with this mind-boggling lie. Christian apologists have been going crazy, declaring that their political foes are all agents of Satan. And of course, these people see Satan under every rock. Satan has come to steal America's soul. This is a spiritual war that will soon transition into a physical one. You've got this guy. He's Dr. Robert Jeffress, First Baptist Church, Dallas, Texas, a huge mega church, like 20,000 members, as I understand it. He does a sermon calling America a Christian nation, the Christian nation lie being used for power and privilege in the United States. These attitudes propped up upon what? A seldom read book of lies. Even the people who genuinely believe them, who are not liars whenever they say that, they believe the Bible is true. The stories themselves have been debunked. They are, in fact, lies. They are dangerous superstitions debunked for centuries. They are simply and demonstrably not true. I mean, the whole Christian religion is essentially based on a lie. From Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden to the flood of Noah to Elijah's flying chariot to Samson's superhuman strength based on the length of his hair to the birth, life, death, and supernatural resurrection of Christ himself. There's just no good reason to believe any of this, and a whole lot of great reasons to totally disbelieve and reject it. Reject it as a lie. And people will often ask me, what's my problem when it comes to religion? Because I've dedicated so much of my life to debunking the bunk, to speaking out about religion specifically. Why can't you just be an atheist? Why can't you just not believe and leave everybody else alone and let everybody do what they're going to do? I had a YouTube commenter actually make the statement like this. He says, "No one can explain to me why it's so important to convince theists to abandon their belief." And my answer to that is that my activism exists because the lie exists. Unfounded religious truth claims exists. And because religion permeates almost everything in the culture. It's everywhere we look. It preaches in our neighborhoods. It infects our science books. It contaminates our politics. It indoctrinates our children. It is everywhere. And non-believers like you and me were simply responding to this avalanche of religious messages that bears down on us every single day. In relation to theistic religions, especially, we've come to realize they are, in fact, a lie. They're simply not true. No good reason to believe it, and a lot of really good reasons to totally disbelieve and reject it. And yet religion continues to get carte blanche to be as vocal as it wants to bother us in our personal lives and our professional lives. Believers are charged with a life mission. Go out and preach and teach and disciple and shout it from the mountaintops to go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. I mean, how many of us have had an evangelist ring our doorbells to rescue us from a sin nature that we do not have? It was actually a lie, right? Because if you debunk Adam and Eve, you have debunked original sin, which means you have no reason for redemption in the Bible. all the rest of the dominoes in Scripture begin to fall. I saw this great sign, by the way. If you are tired of proselytizers ringing your doorbell and bothering you at home, this says, door knockers, please note this household charges $50 a minute to listen to sales pitches, religious messages, and fundraising stories. The charge is payable in advance. By knocking on this door or ringing the bell, you signal your agreement with the terms outlined above. I just thought this was a brilliant solution. I don't know if it would work, but I would be tempted to try it in my own home. And who's doing the knocking? When's the last time an atheist rang your doorbell with the good news of humanism? How often do you find atheist books in the dresser drawers of your hotel rooms? Of course not. You don't find science books. It's always a Bible. If you're in one of the Marriott properties, maybe even the Book of Mormon. When's the last atheist temple erected in your neighborhood? Have you ever been to an atheist revival service? Has atheism ever demanded 10% of your household income? How many dedicated atheist TV channels come through your satellite dish? How many atheist radio stations are playing atheist music 24/7? How many atheist verses were you instructed to memorize as a child? When has an atheist ever threatened you with torment for non-compliance? Right? You see the difference. Religion, the lie, was here first, and we are the ones who have to simply hold up a hand and resist that lie and say, no, we reject this. It is debunked. It is a myth. There is no good reason to believe it, and a lot of really good reasons to reject it. Religion's been a pounding drum that's gone unanswered for so long, and it's not satisfied with merely existing in the homes and the hearts of the faithful. The very nature of theistic religions is to proselytize, right? To ripple outward, to preach and teach and promote and convince and convert and prevail. If you play on the team of the religious, your game plan is to stay always on offense. Those who simply raise a hand of protest, we are often vilified. We are portrayed as the real problem. We're the enemy, enemies of our country, enemies of our fellow human beings, enemies of good. We're treasonous. I mean, the stigma around the atheist remains prevalent today. Even with the rise of the nones or the non-religious, we find that there's still a huge stigma around the word atheist. You can see it in billboards like this one. This was put together by a pastor in West Virginia. Attention, lunatic atheists and their lawyers. Anti-God is anti-American. Anti-American is treason. Traitors lead to civil war. Now, you can see the implied violence in this message. On a more personal note, when I'm asked why I won't just sit down and shut up, I think about my father. He died believing that he was going to be eternally separated from his son, and I was doomed to be tortured forever in hell, and Dad believed in a literal hell fire. His allegiance to the lie cost us a close relationship. Dad would never phrase it this way, but he effectively chose an invisible father over his flesh and blood son, and for that reason, we were about 14 years estranged. And this is right out of the Bible. You read Matthew 10:37, right? Jesus essentially made it a popularity contest where the rest of us have to lose. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. As if a loving deity would ever command a parent reject their own child as part of this popularity contest. Dad used to throw this verse at me. Do not be yoked together with unbelievers, for what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? What can fellowship have, or what fellowship can light have with darkness? He sent me a message once and said, I'm sorry, there can be no fellowship with an unbeliever. This was his attempt, I think, at tough love. I'd sent him an olive branch email, right? And he responded, sorry, son, but until you accept my Jesus, I just can't accept you. And this biblically informed notion of tough love had consequences. It drove us apart. It drove me further away, and that rift lasted 14 long years. My parents would often throw the word love at me, but there was always that asterisk, right? Oh, we love you, but we don't fully recognize you. We're not going to totally validate you. We don't 100% accept you. We don't respect you, right? And this is the message that would come. This is sort of the subtext of love language when it was given in an email or on the phone or in a text at Christmas and Thanksgiving. I love you. I love you. I love you. But there is an asterisk around the word. And when I left my dad's religion, I realized how conditional his acceptance really was. He loved me. He loved me. I genuinely do believe that. But his allegiance was to his faith above everything else. And I became less a flesh and blood son and more of a label, the atheist. Well, what does he do with that? Because he believes that atheists, all atheists, live in rebellion and misery, rudderless, sad, and empty. That, my friends, is a lie. I experience much more joy and goodness and happiness and fulfillment and purpose now on the other side of religion than I ever did within. But the lie serves the narrative. It helps to other the other. It helps to foster the hero versus villain narrative and push this religion forward. It is fueled by a lie. There was a spark of light at the end, if I can do a quick digression quickly. It was the night before he had passed away. And I was actually, it was a few days before he had spent some time with me. We were having a conversation. And I noticed at the end, when I got up to leave, my dad jumped up out of his chair. He was very weak. So it was odd that he would do that. But he jumped up and he gave me a big hug. And I didn't feel the asterisk in that moment. An amazing couple of seconds there. You know, we were just father and son. And then the night before he died, he reached out and took my hand, and we just didn't really speak to each other, but there was a lot of unspoken stuff going on. And in that moment, I didn't necessarily feel the asterisk. I didn't feel the othering. I wasn't as much a label. That does give me a little bit of hope. We were still pretty much estranged when he died, and I still blame religion for it. But to be honest, we did have a few microseconds of connection there. At the end of the day, I wish my dad could have met you. I wish my dad could have known the people who are watching this stream tonight and who I bump into in my travels on the road as an atheist activist, my non believing friends, the people who have constructed their own sense of purpose and who have found and built lives far outside of the lies of superstition. And he would see in your eyes all the good stuff that I see. He would see your eyes and your smiles. He would see your integrity and your value. And maybe he would have seen past the label, past the lie, to discover the amazing humanity. And the walls might have come down even more. I don't know. This is just a theory. This is just a hope of mine. If only he could have left here with his perception widened, his horizon broadened, and his world changed for the better. Now, I've bounced around quite a bit over my presentation, but my point is that beliefs inform actions and lies inform bad actions. From the atrocities against our fellow human beings to the conspiracy theories that are suffocating our news headlines and our social media feeds, to the bad theology that infects children and essentially estranges them from their entire families. It matters if something is true, and it certainly matters when something is not. And that's why we're here. That's why you and I do what we do as activists. That's why we're going to continue to be a pain in the ass when people are harmed by lies, by bad ideas. When we defeat the suffocating lies, we allow more oxygen into the room. We allow more space for the good to survive and thrive. I love what Robert Greene Ingersoll said. His famous quote said, "The more false we destroy, the more room there will be for the true. This has been my coda as an activist. The more false we destroy, the more lies we destroy, the more room we make for the truth. Our hope is that someone won't claim to a mistake just because they spent a lot of time making that mistake. Our hope is that their eyes and ears will be opened and that we can all root ourselves in the true, not the lie, but in the true, as we work together to help our fellow human beings, as we work together to build a better world.
We're all gonna die.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no heaven, no matter how hard you try.
Yeah, miss me with that bullshit that you spitting from that pulpit. All that hocus pocus, abracadabra, all these bad beliefs and bad ideas, I shatter them. What happened, bruh? Getting awfully quiet. Oz was here to start that riot.
We're all gonna die.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no heaven,